What are people going to say to us?
Keep an eye on the registry to see.
Good evening. We'd like to open the planning board meeting of Wednesday, November 29th at exactly 7 p.m. And tonight we have Pam Humphrey, clerk to the board, Kevin Sullivan, member, John Breyer, alternate member, Mark Marziotti, chairman, and Don Johnson, town planner. So we'll get right into the agenda. First item that we have is approval of the minutes for October 30th, 2017 and November 8th, 2017.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes from October 30th as written.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes of October 30th and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Okay, and we'll entertain a motion for November 8th.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the minutes of November 8th.
I second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of November 8th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? We'll sign those. While we're signing those, item B was designed to be a joint meeting with the Economic Development Committee to discuss planning issues. And we have a representative from CMRPC, Central Mass Regional Planning, to make a presentation on the economic development planning, a project on economic development planning. So, Ron, if you want to come up and introduce yourself and share a little bit with us about what you're planning to present. And John, I don't know if you want to.
If I could just jump in.
Yeah.
We had posted an economic development meeting for the same time to be joint with yours. We do not have a quorum, so officially we are not going to have a meeting, but we're going to continue. We have two other members here.
Okay.
We'll have CMRPC present, and we'll just move on.
Great. Excellent. Well, thanks for coordinating it, and we're very interested in seeing what it's all about, and thanks for the great work that you guys do in that committee, for sure. Thank you.
You guys can come up if you want.
Plenty of room.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Again, my name is Ron Barron. I'm with the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. I'm an associate planner there. And I've been working with the Economic Development Committee and Don on the first part of an economic development strategic plan. Now, for those of you who aren't intimately familiar with this plan, what we had envisioned when we started this came out of a discussion in early last year. We got a secured funding through our district local technical assistance program, so we got a grant to work on the first phase of what was envisioned as a three-phase economic development strategic plan. So phase one was, which is what we're in the process of wrapping up right now, was a plan to sort of lay the groundwork to do an asset inventory, a visioning piece, and also to, sorry, I lost my train of thought there, to do a visioning piece and also to do a basic SWOT analysis for some priority opportunity areas that we identified with the town. So what I would like to do tonight is I have a brief presentation. I'd like to walk through it. I'm not sure, but this is the projector is set up to project on the board behind you. I don't know if that'll be problematic or not. The way it's set up right now, it may be a little bit blinding for you guys up there, but
We can move down
We
a
can
little
slide
bit.
over.
okay. I didn't want to slide it open while you guys were, while it was pointed at your face. So the goals for tonight that we had the discussion, I want to be able to walk through what we have done so far, familiarize everybody again with the goals of the plan, and to make sure that the town doesn't have any additional questions, and make sure that there is that there's nothing in the plan or there's nothing that the town wants us to look at that we haven't looked at yet, just to make sure that we're tying up all the loose ends for this piece, and everybody understands, and we're all on the same page. So, quick overview of this. Pardon me. There we go. A little bit out of focus there. So again, this was the first of three proposed phases. In this phase, we were looking again at an asset inventory, visioning statement, and the preliminary SWOT analysis. What we were trying to get out of it, the goals were to lay the groundwork for the full strategic plan, which is going to include an impediments analysis and also a implementation and strategy piece, which will happen over the next 2 years. And then finally, we wanted to identify the preliminary strengths and weaknesses of those areas that the town wants to focus its resources on. So for the work that's done to date, so far we have gone through a prior plan review where we've looked at all of the work that's been done on various plans. This includes the 2000 master plan, 2004 community development plan. We looked at the economic development goals and strategies from that plan. Also, the Central 13 PDA and PPA, which are the priority development and priority preservation areas plan, which was done in 2012. That identified a number of corridors and a number of parcels that the town had wanted to focus its resources on at that time, and we used that as sort of the starting place for us to identify the areas that we felt that would be the best opportunity areas for the town. We also included data from a group called the EMC, which is a data modeling agency that looked at economic data from 2010 to 2016, looked at the 2012 economic census data, looked at the town's open space data, the community economic development, strategic economic indicators, and a number of other sources. So for the visioning piece of it, we took two different tracks. We were looking at what residents had to say about what they thought their priorities should be, and we also wanted to look at what business owners and property owners thought the priorities for the town should be. So the resident part took the form of a community survey, and this is the one that the town took the lead on, and CMRPC had some nominal input on as well. There were 20 questions, 229 total votes, which, for the record, is roughly about 2% of the population, at least based on the 2015 population estimates. And that's not a terrible population, that's not a terrible sample size, but of course, as we go into subsequent phases, we're going to want to do more outreach and try to get more input from the community. On this slide, what we have is just a couple of what I thought were very telling questions that fed in well to the goals and vision piece of this project. The first one, what should our top economic priorities be? 22% said turning our dormant agricultural lands into active farms, wineries, and craft breweries. 16% wanted to revitalize West Main Street, and 15% wanted to create a restaurant district. Where the town should concentrate their economic development efforts, 47% said West Main Street and 26% said Schofield Avenue. Now, there were other options that were on this, but these were the ones that were sort of the highlights that jumped out. And all of this data will end up being included in appendices in the final report when we submit that. And then the final question we included is, would you approve the use of town funds to upgrade existing infrastructure? And 59% said yes, which is a very, very good response. And this is very important specifically in areas such as Schofield Avenue, where there's decent water but not necessarily sewer to all the industrial areas. And so this is a really important piece. And knowing that we've got town support for that is very important. When it came to the local businesses, we ended up having to take a slightly different track. What we had wanted to do originally was to organize a sort of a roundtable discussion group with local businesses. However, the way that the the plan ended up working out the way that the timing landed. We didn't really have the ability to do that. So what was been done instead is I've been going and discussing these issues with business owners on a one-on-one basis. I had a meeting with the Webster Dudley Business Alliance that went extremely well. She put me in touch with a few of her members in Dudley. We spoke with someone at Nichols College, Kauai Farm and Fromagerie. We had a really great discussion there. She was able to give me a lot of information about what it's like to be a small business owner starting off on agricultural land in the town of Dudley. It was very, very insightful. And I've talked to the Sturbridge Coffee Roasters. One of the reasons why I wanted to discuss, get in touch with them is because they're in a site that's connected directly, or it's connected very well to Nichols College, and could be a potential opportunity area in terms of maybe setting up the restaurant district or redevelopment opportunities there. I also spoke with Central Mass Grown, which is a community organization that works with farmers throughout central Massachusetts. And I have others pending, including a scheduled meeting with someone from Gentex. Unfortunately, the person that I was put in touch with wasn't going to be available until after tomorrow. So hopefully next week I'm going to be able to get that set up. And what we're trying to get out of these conversations is a sense of what business owners think the community environment is like, what it's like working with the town, and what they think the best strengths are for the town of Dudley. So out of these discussions, we've started to generate some basic themes for a community vision. Obviously, a big priority was revitalizing West Main Street. There was a number of people who talked about the establishing a restaurant district somewhere. Through the conversations I had with the president of the Webster Dudley Business Alliance, it seemed like an obvious choice is the area around the Stevens Mill and over by the Webster downtown. That seems like a really choice place for that kind of thing. Stevens Mill came up repeatedly, and we're very excited to see hear that the Wind Development is looking at doing something there. I believe it said it was about 92 units of residential and some commercial space as part of their proposal. And that would be really great to see that. And then the third one was that people had talked about activating more farmland and seeing farmland is really a sort of a win-win for the town, where you can generate more economic activity, you can diversify the tax base, and you can also maintain the rural character of the community. And that's something that came up over and over again with a lot of different people that we spoke with. So I'm going to walk very quickly through some of the preliminary findings. We did some just updates of basic economic indicators. This slide is showing population. I apologize that it's a little bit fuzzy. I don't know if I can get that any sharper. Essentially what we're looking at is the two different graphs here. One is the regional population change from 2000 to 2010, showing how Dudley sort of sits in with the neighbors in the southeast corner of CMRPC's region. The towns that are on there are Sturbridge, Charlton, Dudley, Oxford, Auburn, Webster, and Sturbridge, and Massachusetts was put in there as also a measure. So in 2000 to 2010, Dudley's population grew a little bit faster than a lot of the communities in the region. And then the bottom slide is showing the same measurement, but for 2010 to 2015. Again, this is from the American Community Survey, so it is an estimate, but it does suggest that the population did slow, growth did slow in that period to only about 1%, but it was still about in the middle for the neighborhood. This slide is showing the regional population projections, what it's supposed to be, what we're projecting going into 2040. And the rate of growth here is, again, sort of in the middle of the neighbors. Only Sturbridge was a much higher, had a much higher growth rate. And we were looking at, from 2010 to 2020, estimated about 4%. Also for 2020 to 2030, about 4%, and then slowing down 2030 to 2040. Now, again, these are projections, so
Per year or during that entire time period?
that's during those 10-year periods.
Okay.
So, and again, these are estimates based on trends going back several years, and there's a lot of factors that are going to sway those trends one way or the other. So it's just sort of a ballpark to see how the town is supposed to grow. This table is showing the per capita income growth between 2010 and 2015. Per capita, Dudley's growth was about 16%, which is quite a bit, is pretty high for the region. I think the only higher one was in Sturbridge. And the median household income was about 2.4% growth. Now, those two numbers, they're very different because one of them is looking at taking all of the income in a town and breaking it up per capita. The other, the household income, is measuring it on a household by household basis. So you're actually capturing more of the variance in each type of household throughout a town by looking at the median household income than you are for the per capita income. So, but again, it's still showing pretty robust growth in Dudley as far as the income that residents are earning. Now, with the ACS this slide is showing the poverty level in town, and Dudley is was estimated on the ACS at about 10% poverty rate. That is in comparison to towns like Auburn and Charlton, where it's about 4 or 5%. Still, it's about the middle for the region. And then for the ACS, the unemployment rate was estimated for Dudley in 2015 at about 8.8%. Now, it should be noted that the Massachusetts measurement shows that as much lower, but the comparison between the region and Dudley still stands, even though that they do slightly different measurements than the U.S. Census does. So the unemployment rate does look like it has been tracking higher than the regional average for most of the surrounding communities.
What figure are they using for unemployment? Those that are actually getting benefits, or is it self-reported?
These are counting people who are self-reporting. So people who have stopped looking for work, who are just dropped out of the labor force for one reason or another, they're not counted in this figure. It's not necessarily just people who are receiving benefits, but it's people who have reported to the government to say that they're looking for work and they're currently unemployed. So one of the other things we looked at was for the 2000 economic census, and what we're looking at on this table, and again, I will share this with everybody so that you can have a chance to look at a clearer version. And what this is looking at is the two different tables. The first one is the top 10 establishments that were listed in the town, grouped by the NASIX code. That's the code that code definition they use for the different types of businesses. And then the second one is looking at the number of employees that each of those categories have in town. And some of the top ranking ones for number of establishments, professional, scientific, technical services, restaurants and other eating places, and retail trade. But what's very interesting about that is that still, even though manufacturing is relatively low on that top 10 list, it's still in the top 10. But it still ends up being the number one category for job creation in the town. So these are still these are very important sectors for the town. So this particular estimate that we were looking at, this came from the MZ data that we worked with, and this organization does, like I had said, they do economic modeling. What they did is we asked them to take a look at the data that they had created for just the zip code for Dudley. So this is just capturing economic data in the town itself, everything within the zip code in town. So what this looks at is, it looks at the earnings for all the businesses, all the business activity in town, all of the property income, plus the taxes that are generated. And what it's trying to capture is, it's trying to create an estimate of how much money, how much economic activity is generated in town. And what they came up with was $306.5 million that's just generated within the zip code area that services Dudley.
Now, that's not wages, that's just, right?
That's just, that's business activity.
That's the business activity.
Yeah, that's the production.
Like the gross domestic product of the country, this is
Exactly.
our gross.
And that's what they're
product.
trying to do, is
Yep,
they're trying to come
that's-
up with a localized version of the gross domestic product. So, and again, this report that they gave us, we are going to include that in appendix for this report, so you guys will be able to take a look at it and
Beautiful.
See what they did. They also had a regional job trends, which had some interesting information here. That, according to what their estimates are showing, the jobs in Dudley actually grew between 2001 and 2015 by about 10%, almost 11%. A little bit higher than Massachusetts and much higher than the state. So there is indicators that there's a lot of economic activity that is happening in town. But again, this is just an estimate based on the modeling, and you'll be able to take a look at that when we submit the final report. There we go. And then the last one that they indicated here was the growing and declining occupations and growing and declining industries. And this was a little, some interesting information here. For the growing occupations, they were showing large growth in personal care aides, home health aides. You know, the eds and meds is a huge growth industry across the state. Social health services, and a decline in assemblers and laboratory technicians in this region, which seemed fairly interesting. And also for growing and declining industries, the largest growth was with services for elderly and persons with disabilities, which, I'm sorry?
The last line, what does that say? Something goods manufacturing?
That's,
Ophthalmic?
yeah, ophthalmic goods manufacturing. So you did, I can read it clearly, I just was hesitant to try to pronounce it. Which,
I don't know what that is.
you know, I if you would like, I can try to find more information on that. And see, so one of the third things we did is this is look at some opportunity areas, and this one was, these opportunity areas were decided on in conjunction with talking to the town, talking to the Economic Development Committee, and looking at the data that had been collected for the PDAs and other reports. So the first one we looked at was the West Main Street Webster line. And again, as we discussed, there's a number of streets here. There's over 40 acres of commercially zoned land. Much of it is already developed, but a lot of it is developed with a lot of parking, so there could be opportunities for infill development there. It's a natural fit for the commercial cluster that already exists in Webster. There's existing water, sewer concentrated that region. And then the other thing that I found interesting when I did the site visit is that notice that there's a lot of multifamily housing that's clustered over there. So if you have a sort of walkable downtown business zone, that seemed like that would be a good place to put it. If that's what the town would like, that seemed like it'd be a good one, because you already have a large population of people who could walk and would be able to patronize these businesses. As far as the weaknesses, the retail space in Webster is obviously struggling. This is something that we discussed with the Webster Dudley Business Alliance a lot. And at the moment, there's not enough developable space that's open on the Dudley side of the river to develop extremely quickly. So there would need to be some planning, there would need to be some turnover, there would need to be some redevelopment. And again, it only represents a pretty small portion of the overall commercial space that's along West Main Street. However, it is a place where we already have a lot of commercial activity concentrated, and you wouldn't have to, there's not as much residential on Main Street as there is in other parts of West Main Street. As far as opportunities, obviously the Stevens Mill redevelopment is a huge opportunity to try to inject some activity in there. There's the new development, I believe it was a Dunkin' Donuts that's on the corner, just the Main Street corner that's opposite Stevens Mill. And there are a number of well-positioned parcels between the French River and Schofield Avenue. And this is all of those, the dollar store, and all of those activities that are between those two that are on the Dudley side of the bridge. Now, with the limited number of parcels that are available for development, obviously that would make this not as viable or not as much of a silver bullet as one might hope for. Again, there's a number of residential parcels, not as many as there are on other parts of West Main Street, but there still are a lot of residential parcels that obviously the owners of those parcels would not want may not want to change over use there. And then we would need to, I think, to really understand how viable this would be, one thing we'd have to look at is parking minimums to see how much of that land is being given over to parking, and whether or not there was something the town could do to maybe increase the amount of developable land that's in a region like that. The second region that we had written up here is for the West Main Street Nichols College area. This one I personally have found to be a very interesting one. I got to walk essentially all of these streets. I took a long tour along this entire region just to see how it all connected together. Anytime you have a concentration of professors, of students, of young people with money, this is a good opportunity to try to create some new development. There's already a lot of commercial activity along that stretch of West Main Street. What we're looking at here is all of the yellow or the parcels that are in the commercial parcels that are in that area, or at least zoned commercial. The red lines are showing the three main access points to those regions. It's Airport Road, Dudley Hill Road, and Hall Road. All have relatively easy access to the commercial district there. So there's a lot of potential with that. With the weaknesses, the big drawback is that there aren't any sidewalks in most of those areas. And there's very few connections between the college and those districts. The road that does connect that, and I always forget the name of the road, but there's a small little road that turns into Airport Road that connects the Nichols College to the golf course.
Tanya?
Yeah.
Yes, that's the one. And that's a very, very small road. It's not really suited for heavy traffic, probably not even really suited for sidewalks. So we'd have to come up with something pretty clever in order to connect all of those areas. However, there are connections that could be made through the sports field in the back of the college. There's already walkways there to get students from the main road that the college is on to the sports fields. All would really need to take is a walkway that wraps around Airport Road and then sidewalks on some of those streets, and it's something that could definitely be explored. So in part of the opportunities, we looked at Dudley Plaza, which is down on Airport Road. There, it has a lot of parking. It has almost 4 acres devoted exclusively to parking, which may be an opportunity for infill development. And with sidewalks that can connect Airport Road to Main Street, you could end up getting a lot more students and possibly more professors and people bringing money into town. With the threats, obviously there's a lot of residential there, so you would definitely need to make sure that residents were comfortable with the idea of putting sidewalks in there or making better even road auto connections through that region. And obviously the Nichols population is not going to be a silver bullet. It's not a huge population of students or professors and staff. So it would need to be part of an overall strategy. And even though the restaurant and service industries are growing, it's hard to tell if when a town has reached a saturation point. So you'd have to be careful about how many eggs we put in that basket, so to speak. And then the third piece I wanted to talk about tonight was the agriculture. This is one of the more interesting areas that the town has to offer. We have over about 7,000 acres of land that's suited for agriculture. A lot of it is zoned to allow agriculture as a by right use. There's over almost 3,000 acres of Chapter 61A land, which is specifically to protect agricultural uses. There's relatively easy access to major highway routes, particularly 395, so that's something that could be definitely exploited. And in this region, there's a number of aggregator organizations. And what we mean by aggregator organizations is groups that help farmers bring their goods to market. So these are organizations like Farm Fresh Rhode Island, which a couple of the farmers that I spoke with work with, and they help bring farm foods to the farmers markets in Rhode Island. And Central Mass Grown does a similar thing in central Massachusetts. There's also another group that I'm trying to set up a meeting with, that's Central Mass Locavore, which actually does direct-to-consumer sales online, which is a really interesting organization. And again, as far as weaknesses, the startup costs are incredibly high, profit margins are extremely low. The financing is, from what I've understand, pretty difficult to secure. So getting more support for farmers would be very, very crucial for being able to do this, either from the state or the federal government, and that's something that we're hopefully going to be able to pursue in subsequent phases. There doesn't seem to be a high demand among investors or entrepreneurs, and what we mean by that is that, again, banks aren't jumping to fund farm operations, and while there's an increase in the number of people who are interested in becoming farmers, it still doesn't seem like it's reached critical mass yet. So there isn't this huge rush for people to come to the table and start to become farmers.
Well, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
I know you've done work on the agricultural side. You know, you've got a history there. One of the concerns is, right, you've got 2,800 acres, 61A, right? We're given tax breaks. Mm-hmm. And these property owners can get these tax breaks without really farming it, is my understanding, as long as they report like $1,600 a year in income.
Yes,
right?
I don't
It qualifies
remember.
as agricultural.
Yeah, and I don't remember the exact number, but yes, it's not very high.
It's not very high. And so one of the issues is, as you go around, a lot of these fields are now becoming forested, right? The trees are growing because they're not active. And the concern is that some of these people are using this as a tax shelter. That, you know, they're sitting on it, the town is subsidizing it, and then when the opportunity comes down the road, whether they can sell it to a private developer and turn houses into it, or, you know, subdivide it and sell houses, lost themselves, that's when they'll do it, and then maybe they'll pay back the back taxes or whatever that was subsidized. Is there a way, or is it a state or a federal issue to get that changed? Where if Dudley created a match service, so to speak, between those that are not landowners that want to farm or are willing to make the investment and become farmers, and those that have the asset, which is the land, where if we can put these two together and they can actually become productive farms, if they join a program like this, we don't care what the income is because we know that they're actually building it. But for those that are using it as tax shelters, where we can weed them out, sort of flush them out of the brush and get full taxation on those properties if they're really not going to turn them into agricultural land?
Well, there's two different programs going on there. So for the tax shelter, that's a state issue. That's something that's set up under. It's managed locally, but it's set up under the state law. So in order to change that, to make it more difficult or to make it more tailored to farming activities as opposed to just like the minimal amount, just, you know, hay farming or whatever people are doing in order to maintain the tax benefit, that would have to be changed at the state level. For the program, for something like what you're talking about, that could be something that the town could try to pursue. The issue with that is because it really wouldn't take much. You wouldn't really have to change very much to try to work with people who are getting the benefit under 61A to try to connect them with people who want to farm. There are organizations that are doing that. In fact, the state of Rhode Island is working on something like that right now, where they're the state itself is trying to incentivize farmers to lease their land to new farmers in order to make that connection, and it's getting a lot of pushback, but it's something that they're doing. So there's no real reason why the town couldn't do it other than the capacity issue, where you'd have to have somebody who is working on it pretty much full time.
There's something like going on in Connecticut too.
Yeah, there's one in Connecticut that I'd heard of.
If you see articles like that or efforts like that by the states, would you mind just sending over the links or the articles so that we can kind of keep, reading on it? I'd be interested to see what Rhode Island's doing, because that's exactly what we want. It's exactly what we want to do. Incentivize the use.
Mm-hmm.
Send you information in Connecticut's too.
Okay. Thank you.
So, and just to wrap up with this one, talking about quickly the opportunities, there's, like we're saying, there's a lot more people who are interested in purchasing farm-to-table products. people, I know personally, I have a tendency to go out of my way to get stuff from local farmers, and as soon as I find one that'll sell me chicken directly in Massachusetts, I'll stop going to Rhode Island for it. So, you know, the market is there. It's not necessarily, it's not necessarily at critical mass yet, but it's definitely growing. Now, and that feeds into what the threats are, because there's no guarantee that that kind of market is going to be sustainable. It's not necessarily going to stay. There's nothing that's guaranteeing it's going to be there. Same thing with people who want to farm. There's more people who want to farm. Not necessarily any guarantee that they're going to stay, that they're going to keep wanting to farm. So the last thing I want to talk about is, and I think this kind of leads into it, what we're looking at for the Phase 2 and Phase 3 piece of it. We want to look at an impediments analysis, and basically what that is we look at all the places that we have identified as opportunity areas, and we look at, okay, we've decided what we want to see in these areas, now we have to understand why it's not happening, and really drill in on the things that the town has the capacity to control, talking about zoning, regulation, permitting processes, what's the experience with people trying to start businesses with the towns, how do they interface with all the departments, that sort of thing. Is there any place that's within the town's control that they can incentivize? We can also look at things that the town might be able to do to set up new programs, like what you were just discussing with the agriculture. The other thing we want to do is start looking, and again, these are recommendations. We're going to have to hammer this out as we go into in January and March before we get into the next DLTA round. But my initial thoughts on this is some sector-specific workshops I think would be extremely useful. If we can have farmers, some aggregators, and educators. I actually got a lead for a really great organization that's out in western Massachusetts, who specifically does things that are supplemental to breweries. So they do hops, they do grains, they do things like this. And from what I understand, they do a lot of education too. So I've been told that they would be I haven't gotten a chance to talk to them yet, but I've been told that they'd be very interested in talking with just about anybody who wants to know more about this. The Webster-Dudley Main Street corridor, I think it would be very interesting, and obviously this would have to be a discussion with both towns, but I think it would be very interesting to see what could be done to coordinate something with that corridor between the towns of Webster and Dudley. Now, we could do this as part of this next phase, or we could look at it as something completely separate, but I think that would be something that would be very useful to try to see if there's a way that we can find out what the commonalities are and how we can really unlock the potential of that corridor, because there's a lot of great buildings there. There's I think a lot of potential for that corridor. And then with the Nichols Main Street area, I think a neighborhood workshop would be extremely useful so that we could talk to Nichols, we could see what they would be willing to do, we can work with the town to see what potential we can do as far as complete streets, sidewalks, biking, and find out what residents would be willing to entertain, what they would favor, what they would be willing to live with as far as changes to that area. As far as phase 3, that would end up being where we would really get into the implementation and the recommendations. Now, I have that it's down for 2019. That really depends on funding and capacity. If we can figure out a way that we can do it all by the end of next year, that would be fantastic. But you know, the safe bet, given the way funding goes, it's usually it's usually a safer guess to say we can do phase 2 next year, phase 3 the following year, and then get it all done. So that was actually quite a bit longer than I wanted it to be, but I appreciate your time, and if you have any questions, I'd be willing to answer them now, and we can talk about how we're going to go forward.
Looking at sector-specific workshops, I think is the way you put it. I just want to take a look at Schofield Avenue, too.
Yeah, Schofield I originally had a slide for Schofield Avenue, but I realized there's still some loose ends in my data that I need to close before I'm going to include that as an opportunity area in the actual report, but I wasn't able to include it in the slide Because when it got to the opportunity pieces, I wasn't as confident in what I'd be able to say about that. So I have to update some information on that. I realized that some of the stuff I had was a little outdated. So I'm actually going to have to work with you, Don, in the next week or so to get
good.
that closed up. So,
Time to do that.
yeah.
It was on the initial survey, it was West Main Street, was it 2 locations in West Main Street, or was it one, I'm sure. I thought it was just West Main Street and Schofield Ave.
Well, it wasn't entirely clear which parts of West Main Street residents were talking about. So what we're looking at is the 2 areas of West Main Street that have the highest concentrations of commercial activity right now. Because between those 2 areas, there's a large, as you well know, there's large stretches of residential. It's zoned commercial all the way down, but a lot of that, those current uses are residential. Another area that we didn't really explore in this yet, but maybe something that we could look more into in the next phase is the home business piece of it. We didn't have a lot of clear data from what I was able to get on home businesses. One of the slides that it was a little hard to read from the economic census, there was one of the largest growth categories was something that was just listed as other, not government business. I need to look into that to see exactly what that's looking at, but my suspicion is that that's where a lot of the home businesses and self-employment is being captured in that data. So.
Well, that was well done. It was interesting to see, for sure.
Informative.
Would you be able to provide that?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and I'll post it on the website.
Okay, great.
That way other departments can start seeing what we're doing there too. But no, I'm very pleased. We're definitely on the same page. I mean, the first couple of slides, just knowing the growth rates and where we stand today and what's growing, what's not. That very important stuff. So thank you very much. I thought you did a great job here.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'm, as I said earlier, I have a few other people that I'm going to try to talk to before we're done with this. My goal is to have this wrapped up and have something delivered to the town by the week before Christmas at the absolute latest. So it's going to have to be before that because I'm going away.
All right. And just so you know, right, our mandate from the planning board and selectmen and the bylaw states that we have to have a 5-year economic development plan. And I notice you had some things going 2018, 2019, and that's all right, because I think what we're probably going to do is, our goal is to have a plan, what we may call the first phase of it, that incorporates over the next 5 years, things that we need to do to continue down this path, and there are things that we can do immediately now. But it's really going to be one of those living plans that has to be updated every year. I mean, it just can't be a plan that we do and it's just on the shelves for 17 years. So what my intention will probably be is we'll come up with our first draft. We'll incorporate everything from CMRPC, the survey, all those additional reports. And we'll say, okay, folks, this is kind of where we stand now. And as of now, the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, these are the steps to get to this area.
And again, that's a conservative timeline. If we start talking about, once we've submitted this, then sometime in January, we're going to start talking about how we can shape the next phases. And we may be able to come up with a plan that we're able to execute and start getting at least preliminary strategies out of this and implementation steps by next year if we're careful in how we scope this out and really develop the next stage of this plan. So maybe not the full implementation strategy, but there will definitely be things that we'll be able to act upon that'll come out of the next steps of this.
So the gross regional product slide, you have that number. Is that something that we can rely upon consistently every year to get an updated number on that?
That is in the works. That particular piece of it, that company is, their model is proprietary. So we are looking into funding to try to see if we can get that information reliably. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have that. So we're looking for
Okay.
funding to see if we can.
Because what better way to have an objective number that actually shows you is what you're doing working, right?
it
You got
is.
your
That's-
baseline, and just like the government, right? So that'd be fantastic if you guys can pull that off somehow.
No, and it's something that we're looking at because
Okay.
their product was very good, and we were very happy with what they were able to provide with us for these projects that we're working on. So
So Ron, you said you were at CMRPC for how long?
since January of this year,
Okay. And
so almost a year.
what did you do before that?
Well, before that, I was in school.
Okay.
Before that, I worked for a company that did meeting facilitation and can't really say, I wouldn't say event planning, but what they did is they would work with organizations like nonprofit organizations and things like that, and
Okay.
run the meetings, plan the meetings,
Yeah.
develop reports, that sort of thing. So,
All right.
and when I was in school, I worked with the SERPED region, which is the southern RPA that covers like Taunton and that part of the
Mhm.
state. So.
Okay. And our planner's background comes from the Putnam, Connecticut area, which is obviously, on an economic development standpoint, is very mature. And,
Worked in Massachusetts community for 20 years as well.
okay, but
So
I guess where I'm leading this, Don, is did you, I can't imagine that you probably saw it from when it started, that economic development piece, and I wanted you to compare that to kind of where we're at today and where we're going.
Putnam is a strong downtown,
Yeah.
and it's also somewhat more oriented. There's a lot of activities that take place in the downtown
Yeah.
area. A lot of organized activities.
But it was that way when you began in Putnam?
Yeah, it was. It had been developing for some time. It was on its way up, let's put it that
Yeah.
way, as far as the
Okay.
activities are going.
Yeah. No, I certainly think this is a really good approach, that this committee has spearheaded, and I'm encouraged by, what was just presented, and certainly, the direction that it's going in, that's for sure. So, thank you for that.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Ron.
much.
I
Appreciate it.
You guys can go. There's really no need at this point for you guys.
All right, well, thanks again, guys. Sorry we couldn't have a joint meeting, but essentially we did.
Yeah.
And those who missed, but you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. We're just about done here. That was really the rationale behind our meeting tonight, was so that we could see this and visit with you guys. So as we move on in our agenda, it's the planner's plate. Don, I don't know if you have anything here.
Just a few things I can update you on, what I'll be doing.
Yeah?
On the 7th of December, there's a meeting of the Webster Dudley Business Alliance, which John shaking his head, I think he was invited as well. So I'll be going to that one.
Okay. And where's that being held?
Not sure.
Looks
Somewhere
like
Webster.
Point Breeze or something, right?
Is it there again?
Yeah.
Is it there again?
Point Breeze?
Yeah,
I think that's where it was, because they were going to have a meeting, and then for those that wanted dinner to hang out.
yeah. The green communities, we've had a couple of companies express interest in looking at the possibility of LED lighting for the street lights. We've been working with Greg on that one, as well as vendors.
Mhm. Let me jump back a second. So I'm involved with the Webster Dudley Oxford Chamber of Commerce as well.
Okay.
And there's a very large initiative between Webster Dudley Oxford as an affiliate of Worcester Chamber of Commerce for Discover Central Mass. and it's quite large, and it's gotten some good notoriety. I'd like to maybe give you the current president of the Webster Dudley Oxford, his name, and you can maybe have a chat with him and see if there's some things there that may tie into. And do you know Dennis Luco
No.
from Abashan?
I don't.
He's the current president. Yeah, it's moving quite well, and there's some good steam behind it, I think. So maybe something for you guys to have a look at as well. But I know that the Dudley Webster Business Alliance is doing some good things as well, so, yeah.
Okay, good.
Anyway.
Tomorrow, I'm meeting with this Greg, town administrator, and also with the sewer and water superintendent about the links to Stevens Mill. So we'll see what we come up with on that one. That all goes back to the information they were requesting that we supply them about what's going on in our town that would be considered sort of a town match. You know, support of the project.
Mm-hmm.
That's some of the things I'll be doing over the next few weeks.
Okay,
And following up on this report, obviously.
yeah. All right, great. Thank you. Any comments from the board?
Not as of now.
No?
Just, the gentleman who wanted to join our planning board, is he still coming on board? Are we
That's
gonna
a great
set up a
question.
meeting?
I don't
or-
know, Michelle got in touch, tried to get in touch with him. I don't think she's heard back from him yet.
Okay.
I can try too if you want, but you know, she's working on it too.
Yeah, maybe if you can find out the status of that, that would be great. Because he was supposedly just waiting for the town meeting to
Yeah.
finish up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. Comments? No?
Thanks for having us.
No, thanks for coming here.
Always a pleasure.
All right. And no one else here, so I guess entertaining a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
7:51.
Thanks, Fred.
Perfect.